going to chat about building products, acquiring customers, and then any other things that you want to know. So we presume that everyone's enrolled in the Makerpad challenge if you have made your way here, and also likely that you'll be building a product or at an early stage of building a product. Unless you finished it, grown it, and sold it in the first 9 days of this challenge, then hopefully what we're going to talk about is relevant for you. So the man I'm speaking to here is Arvid, and I will let him just do a quick intro to himself.
All right, that's always the hard part because I have so much to say. No, hey, so I'm Arvid Kahl. I run a blog called The Bootstrap Founder. I recently released a book called Zero to Sold. And I used to run a SaaS business called Feedback Panda. It's an education technology business where we helped online teachers with their stressful and highly underpaid lives. We started the business in 2017, sold it in 2019 for a life-changing amount of money. And ever since then, I've been reflecting on what I learned, not only through Feedback Panda, but also the decade before with all the failed attempts at actually building a business. And I've been sharing this stuff on Twitter, on Indie Hackers, in every community, in every podcast that I can be on, just to help other founders, maybe not necessarily not make the mistakes I made, but make them consciously, just really get there a bit faster and a bit easier, and have the little bit of knowledge that I can share and share it with the people.
Like it. And how's that transition been away from like working full time? I'm sure you're working on other things, but has that been easy or tricky?
I know the moment when it happened, like when we sold the business, and I was like working on and in and throughout the business 24/7. We sold it, we handed it over, and then crickets. Like the moment of plunging into the void. That was weird. And everybody told me it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen, and it still happened in a way I didn't expect to. So we took a vacation when we sold the business, and then we kind of tried to figure out what are we going to do. And I jumped right into writing because I guess for somebody who, I come from a software engineering background, right? So I understand code and I understand writing for machines, like telling a machine what to do. And I try to continue doing the instructing part, but this time for people. So I kind of migrated it over to writing for people, which is a much more, I guess, both ambitious thing because you have opinions and people have opinions. Machines don't necessarily have opinions and they won't tell you, right? They don't give you a 5-star or 0-star rating. They just either do or don't do what you want them to do. But it's also the more impactful thing for me. I feel like now, as somebody who's actually talking to people and trying to help people with their problems in their journeys, I have much more impact on the lives of not just those people, but also the people they help, right?
Got it.
So it's another level of having impact on people's journeys, which I quite appreciate. But it was hard. It was tough. It was surprisingly weird because if you had purpose in life and somebody bought your purpose and is now owning your purpose, what are you going to do? It's pretty strange.
It's quite strange. I actually never thought about it that way.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean, the purpose of Feedback Panda was to help people, and we can still help people, but the means are gone, right? Somebody just took away the thing that you use every day, or through which you fulfill your ambition, and then you have to find a new thing. So that was quite a challenge to get that running again. It's like you built this product now, and then at some point you sell it to somebody. Well, you have to build a new product to be able to do what you just did, right? So it's true. It's another business that I'm building at the moment, pretty much, but it's a content business, and media business.
Yeah, so that's probably a good segue actually. So we're a week into the challenge. There's going to be some people in here who are currently building a product or a service or a business for this challenge. And you may be in the same boat as they are, starting off a new project. How would you kind of tackle the early stage, like the first week? You could either talk about like identifying the problem, but maybe people have already done that. So what's the next step after that?
Just really gonna go through it quite quickly because I've been talking about this quite a bit, and I've actually been mentoring people on this particular stage as well.
Yep.
And I believe that you should always start with the audience, right? You should always start with the people that you want to serve. From that springs everything else. And with audience, I just mean a group of people that you want to empower. For us, that was online teachers. For the people in this workshop, it could be any group of people that they want to help. But being precise about who you want to help is the foundation of building a business in a reliable way.
Mhm.
Because I often hear this, people start with an idea, they start building, and then they kind of try to graft the audience on after the fact. That can work, and it might work, but it probably won't work. Because just the risk of having built something that doesn't solve a problem, or having built something that solves a problem, but for the wrong people who are not willing to pay for it, or maybe solving this problem for the right people, but it's not critical enough for them to even bother. There's so many risks and so many unknowns and points of where you have to guess if you start with the product first, that I always recommend starting with the conceptual entity that is everybody you want to help. And
Yeah.
from there, you go and look into their actual issues that they have, for the struggles that they have in their life, the professional struggles, the kind of reasons why things don't work the way they should work.
Mm.
And that's where the problem comes in. And that's where you find the problem, probably the most critical problem they have, because that's the one they're most likely to pay for. And then you start solving it, and then you start building. I assume that some people in this workshop may have already started building and may not be as clear about their audience as I would like them to be. So we can definitely talk about how we can do this retroactively.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is, if you know who you're serving and you validate they exist and they could actually sustain your business, and then you find their biggest problem and you validate that is actually a problem for them, and then you find out how you can solve it and you validate that it works for them in the workflow that exists, and then you build your product. All these layers of validation guarantee that you don't have to guess if there will be an audience for the product that you're building, because you're literally validating every single step of the way there. So if you have done this, congratulations. And if not, we could still do this.
Okay.
The question is, how can you go back there without necessarily losing the momentum that you already have?
Like it. Okay, so we need a bit of honesty from those in the audience right now.
Be good, yeah.
Who started making by just like guessing a problem and not talking to anyone about it first, and who did it Arvid's way around, where they've actually gone and speaking to people and actually identified a problem before they did it and actually validated something? Because this is a thing we actually touched on briefly with Mubs in the workshop yesterday. Obviously, if you're watching it in the future, it's not yesterday anymore, but the replay is available. Because Mubs is a serial maker, and he's published more products, both the combination of solving problems for other people and then also building like based off of feedback. So he's very much in line with what you said. So Siddharth, building parallelly with feedback. Okay. That's good.
That's pragmatic. I particularly, I guess, in the no-code space, that is a pragmatic approach to do it, because you're literally wiring things together that are easily unwired and rewired, right? It's not the same if you're actually, I don't know, like making a physical product where you need to make a prototype and test it and then manufacture it, or even in the software engineering space where you have to do all of this upfront work, like build the authentication system and like get some infrastructure going, all these strenuous and time-consuming things that in the no-code space, I feel that building in parallel is still perfectly valid.
Yep.
But you do have to make sure that you actually respond to the feedback and you don't just pick the things that you already agree with, right? Confirmation bias is a thing that we all have at all times. We are often not aware of it, which is the problem, particularly when it works in our favor. So taking some time to reflect on the feedback and maybe picking out the things that annoy you, that when you read them, you kind of, I worked so hard on this and they don't like it. That is your most potential point of growth compared to, oh yeah, people seem to like what I'm doing, right? Because there's this book called The Mom Test. I think I recommend it every single day, like a couple times in different circumstances, by Rob Fitzpatrick. Yes. And he wrote this particularly to allow you to understand how not to talk to customers and how not to talk to your potential, your prospects. Because if you talk to somebody and ask them, do you like what I've done? And they are your customer, or they are somebody who kind of likes you, well, they're not going to say no. It's like asking your mom if she's proud of you for some reason, right? So most true. Mothers who are not like very sarcastic, they will actually tell you yes, and they will actually be proud of you, even though what you've done may not be up to scratch. It may not be the perfect solution. So asking the right questions is just as important as not asking certain questions, and then following up by understanding the feedback as a means of improvement and not a means of confirmation.
Got it.
That's what I would like to say for building parallel, because that's the risk that I would definitely fall into, and I wouldn't want to. I want to warn people to do not be like me, how I used to be, at least.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those, if you show someone and they almost, if they're just a good person, they'll say they appreciate the effort you've gone through to actually build it in the first place. So they'll just be, yeah, that's great. But one thing I would change is this. Whereas if you just came up with the idea, they're like, oh, okay, he hasn't actually built him yet. Here's a good chance to kind of put it on the right track and actually like solve a bunch of issues before the effort's gone in. So people don't want to like feel bad by just like chopping you down at the knees, but you actually put some effort into something.
And it's really also a matter of what you ask, because you can ask, I mean, what value does the response to the question, do you like my product, have to you? Other than either it's confirmation that people like it or they don't, but it says nothing about why they like it or why they wouldn't like it. So instead of going for these kind of empathetic questions, asking for yes/no questions that actually describe a point of how can I describe this? Let me give you an example. The question, does the tool as it is right now, I've shown you, you give somebody like a 2-minute demo of your tool, does this fit into your workflow? Now that is an interesting question, because if it doesn't, the follow-up immediately is, well, where doesn't it fit? And then you see, oh, so my tool only allows you to import like an Excel sheet, but you have comma separate value files, or you don't even have files. You only have like something you can copy and paste like from the clipboard or some integration through an API. And you need that, but I don't supply it. Okay, that makes sense, right? There's immediately something valuable. So asking people how this fits into their workflow, or if they can use it, not if they would use it, but can you even use this tool? The example that I give for that mostly is, I used to be part of a company here in Berlin, also a bootstrapped business that I founded with a couple of friends for local food, where we wanted to bring local food from the surrounding area around Berlin and Germany, which is a very metropolitan city. And just outside of Berlin, it's very agrarian. So it's perfect. There's good food out there and people who want to eat good food in the city. And we wanted to kind of bridge the gap and bring this food into the city and have the hipsters eat it. That was the idea. So we built a tool for the farmers to update their inventory. And we built it as a SaaS app, which was, why did we do this? Like, if you know what a farmer does? They farm. They're out there. They don't even have their phone out there because they don't want to drop it in the soil. So building anything that we expect people to use on a phone or on a computer when they barely even use this technology, that was not a good idea, right? We should have had either like some sort of concierge that calls them up in the evening and gets like a list of things and then puts them into the system, or have like some sort of AI where they could just yell at their phone for a minute and it will translate it into inventory. We never thought of that. We thought, they're just going to log in on this complicated website that you can only open with like a modern browser. These people had to get computers from the 90s, right? We just did not communicate with people. We did not have a validation at all, because we never thought about what those people had as restrictions, as constraints. And if you think in constraints, if you ask for people, well, what would keep you from using this? That is such a better question to get interesting answers out of people than, do you like what I have here? Right? Just asking for points of failure, points of friction, points of where stuff wouldn't work, will give you much more in these kind of conversations than just getting validated. Validation is more invalidation than it is about validation, right? It's always about, there's this German sociologist called Niklas Luhmann. I used to study this stuff, so it's always fun to bring up these examples. And he said, no theory can ever be validated. It can ever be verified. It can only be invalidated. And you only need one counterexample to invalidate any theory. Right? You can get as many examples that validate the theory as you want, but the moment you find one example that doesn't, the moment you find a counterexample, the whole theory is invalid. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do at all these stages with your audience. Is it the right size audience? Are they willing to pay? Are they even interested in stuff? Do they even want solutions to their problems? And then the critical problem, is this critical? Can they delegate it? Do they need to do it often? Is it painful? Does it cost them time or money? And then with your solution, does it fit into the workflow? Does it impede other jobs to be done? Does it create side effects? These kind of things. You can always ask these questions, and they're super specific. And the moment you find a counterexample to your theory of what you should be doing, you go one step back and you look at the next potential option, right?
Right.
The audience is validated. You found their problem. You try validating your solution, and they say, no, this doesn't fit. You go back to the problem and you try another solution until you find the solution that fits, and then you build the product. It's like a stacking approach, I guess, to stacked validation.
Absolutely. Love that. This just reminded me, I had a flashback of a product we started we used to work for called Teachers Register, where we built like an on-demand supply teaching app. Mm-hmm. And as you just explained, we kind of like rushed ahead and just assumed what they wanted. And then we organized like a teachers meetup, like way too late. And we said, okay, like everyone get out their phones. And I've never seen like a wider variety of actual handsets come out. We were like, holy,
like a flip phone from the 90s, like Motorola Razr and stuff.
Like, what have we done? So, right, we're gonna need an SMS solution. So that was really interesting.
But this is something that you could have so quickly validated by asking just this question, right? What are your technical constraints? And I think Brian in chat raises this point. Like, if your customer is non-technical, you just really ask where they are right now. And the thing is, if they are non-technical, they will not give you technical answers. So you have to kind of guide them into answers like what you said. What kind of phone are you using? If you want to kind of just figure out what level of technology they have, or how old is your computer, right? That is probably a question that people might be truthful about. I guess it's fine to say I have like a 10-year-old computer, but it will give you a pretty clear introspection into the lives of those people. Mm-hmm. So I think asking for what people know is always important and where they're at. Sometimes it will be hard because people don't really have the vocabulary to describe it in a way that is meaningful to you. Like we had that with our teachers too. These were online English teachers, but they were mostly English teachers that were either just really new to the online teaching thing, or they just needed a second job. So we served this audience of people that were more or less non-technical. They knew how to use a browser. And that was pretty much it, right? It's like when you ask them, so how do you open the internet? And they say, well, I click the internet, that is the kind of response you get. So asking them to describe it in a way that is meaningful to you is a conscious effort you have to take to get useful answers out of people.
Got it. How do you, so a couple of questions. How do you actually go around, actually, while I ask this question to Arvid, is who in the chat is actually working on a product that actually solves a problem and they actually want to turn into a business, and who in the chat is just working on like an interest-based passion project, like just for fun through this challenge? So one question I had was, how do you actually go through, like practically wise, how do you actually go through and like collate all this information you're going out and getting? Is there like a specific tool or workflow you work through to bring this all together?
Well, I can tell you how I personally do it. I would have like a Notion document or a Google Sheet where I collect this kind of stuff, both because they're easily shareable, and the moment you interact with other people. The one thing that I hate when it comes to interacting with other people is sending files back and forth via email. I just think this is such a 90s thing to do, or like, early 2000s. And surprisingly large amount of businesses and industries still operate like that. Yep. I can tell you that because I work with a professional editor to edit my book. And surprise, surprise, we were sending back Word files over email the whole time. And I was like, what? Why is this? Is it 2020 or is it not? But apparently, even those people who work with technology every single day had no clue on how to do this in a Google Doc, or there was not a tool on the market, apparently there still isn't, to collaborate on a professional editor level, right, where you have a lot of tracing and tracking of comments and certain things. So that didn't exist. So apparently it's word back and forth. So when I try to avoid that, so I go for Notion most of the time. But I think a good Google Doc or a Google Sheet will also do the trick. The trick here is to make notes while you do the things, if you can, like while you talk to people, take notes then, or record it and have it automatically transcribed,
Mhm.
and then go through the notes again. And another thing that I did when we did this with our customers was record it, transcribe it, wait a couple days, and then go into it again. Like being too close to the actual conversation might skew your perspective on how important certain things were.
Okay.
And your mind plays tricks on you just for immediacy bias, and again, a couple of confirmation biases and lots of others. So give it a day or two and then work through it and try to condense it into something that you can quickly survey for multiple customer conversations that you had. So you pretty much want to probably have a document for each single conversation, and then one kind of summary list style, table style document where you have all these things for every single of your customer conversations in the same document.
Got it. We did the first workshop for this challenge was actually with Kay, who's a Notion pro. So he actually set us up like a really good system about putting everything in tables and relating them to each other, and never just having like standalone pages, because they have like no metadata attached to them and you can just lose them in your workflow. So we'll get that shared to everybody if
it's
on
good.
the chat. That was really useful to know. So we had a few responses. So Siddharth is building for fun, and then Tristan's trying to solve a problem and turn it into a business, and then Travis just been doing it interest based, and Brian is working on a business.
50-50 split. Nice.
Okay, nice. How would so I guess, or I presume, you may tell me otherwise, but since you had or moved on from Feedback Panda, you've pursued some interest based projects. How did you find the comparison between working on like a business project and working and approaching a personal interest-based project?
That's a pretty good question. Thanks for that. Never really reflected on that. So this is going to be quite immediately straight from the brain. I started this whole like writing project as somebody who's never written before. I never wrote much. I mean, I wrote in school and I kind of studied philosophy. You have to write and these kind of things, but didn't really do it professionally ever. So jumping into this was more a learning experience that I always wanted to have, right? I always wanted to write. I always wanted to like share my thoughts. And in understanding that writing also clarifies your own thoughts, it is a reflection tool more than it is a distribution tool. At least it was then for me. It was my own passion project. I just really wanted to take all my learnings and put them on a page, kind of share them with the world, but it was more for me to actually get them out of my mind, out of this kind of nebulous shape that they were in, and get them into a more stringent kind of shape. And you're right, it was just an interest-based project at the time, but over time it turned into a business. Like I started thinking, so I have this newsletter, and I never really wanted to make a newsletter. I just started it so I have some sort of accountability, right? So I had to write something every week because I'm super lazy. If I could, I would just sleep for 7 days straight. But with a newsletter, I couldn't, because I would need to write something every week. And I still do. I think it's issue 48 or something at this point. So that's 48 weeks of me forcing myself to write. And the same with the podcast that I have, the Bootstrap Founder podcast, same deal. I have to talk about something every week. And if I don't, then I would break the streak. And I don't want to break the streak because we all know streaks are where it's at, right? So kind of continuously have to force myself. And in doing so, other people got interested in what I was doing. Both, of course, like readers and listeners, but also sponsors. Like the people at Balsamiq reached out to me because they sponsor podcasts, and they said, well, you seem to have a good podcast that is really on point with the same topic that we want to talk about, or the kind of companies that we want to support. Would you like to be sponsored by us? And Balsamiq does this wonderful thing where they don't do advertising for themselves, but they allow other Bootstrap founders to do their own ads on other people's shows. They just pay for it, but other people get the exposure. And that was fun. I think I did that for 8 episodes, somewhere in between, and they paid me like a couple $100 for that. That was cool, but I stopped with that because I felt I don't want to kind of too much cater to sponsors or make the podcast only about sponsors, because it was still only an interest-based project. And then, of course, the the articles turned into the guide that I wrote, the guide turned into the book, and that was something that was an actual product. And I guess that was when I figured out, oh, this is actually a business. This is a for-profit enterprise. But I still mostly treat it like something I just like to do, because if you sell a business for what I'm allowed to say is a life-changing amount of money, then you don't really care that much about making money immediately.
Yeah.
You know, like you try to give back to the people who, or just pay it forward, I guess, to those people who are next in line to get to that kind of stage. So it was weird, but it was a migration. So looking now at these people who are building an interest-based product, who knows where this is going, right? Because it might be that it's so interesting that it will be too interesting to stay just an interest-based product in the future. And I would at least consider this in building the product at this point. Like
that's it's like an interesting transition that businesses have made, really, and it comes up quite a lot now, maybe more so than before, where the actual like how a business or product or service comes together is kind of flipped around, because now people are saying that if somebody's got like an audience on, I don't know, any social media platform, and they just talk about what they're interested in, then that like naturally kind of forms like a mini community, and they just follow them for various reasons. Then out of that can maybe spur like a newsletter or like a website which people visit and they want to like find out some information, and then from that comes like a product to serve to those people, and then that just naturally grows, rather than, which is like the traditional way around, is like I want to start a business, I'm going to go out looking for a problem to solve, not necessarily in my like wheelhouse or interest based, and then I'm going to go and build a product there. So how do you think those two compares? Because also there's a question around creating content and building community. So often if you're building like a product and you're thinking about a problem first, you think about the product, the service, how can I get customers? Whereas if you're going the other way, it's often you're naturally producing content anyway, and then that content spurns a product.
I feel like what you're describing is a perfect example of audience first approach to business. And there's product first or idea first, and that's audience first. For me, those are like the strictly separated ones. And I feel that content in an audience first kind of approach is just, it's emergent. It comes from your interaction with the audience. Like every day I'm on Twitter, way too much, I think, but I am on Twitter every single day. And yeah, I know, I read your tweets quite often, and there's always something going on. There's always a discussion about something. There's always a conversation. And if you have an audience either that follows you, which means you already built up this kind of following, or you are just one of those people following others with a following, you will see what the trends are, what people are talking about. And you have a super easy time contributing to this. You just need to reply and give your opinion. And if you have something meaningful to say that is maybe not just said in a tweet, well, then you write a blog post within like an hour or two, and you post it into the Twitter thread or into the Indie Hackers thread or on the Makerpad platform or wherever you are, right? You can always kind of create content and specifically to the ongoing conversation. And I think that's different from the idea first, product first approach, where you start doing content marketing. You write articles that you think your audience might want to read. Yeah. And I don't want to be derisive here. This is still a perfectly valid approach if you choose to do this. But I feel it is, again, a half guess, at least. It's like, okay, we hope that this content will attract people, right? Instead of having the people already kind of listening to what you're saying and then just telling them, well, this is what I'm thinking. I wrote about it on the blog that you already visit anyway. And then there's a little, either the newsletter conversion thing on the bottom or a try out our SaaS link with a discount or whatever, right? You get people onto your product by just funneling them through the channels that they already like to visit anyway, which is, I think, the more founder-centric approach, because if you are a solo founder or in a small team, you can still and should probably be the person that is behind the business and not just hide behind a business, a name of a business. I think we, particularly in this community where founders know each other and they want to share information, they help each other, they support each other, being a real person, particularly in the early stages, is extremely beneficial, because you will build a following around you as a brand. And then there will be a business, which is kind of merged into you, but you can separate them on some level. And the people following you because you're just interested in helping and supportive and sharing, they will look into your business, right? They will check out what you're building. They might buy what you're building just because they want to help you out. At least that's how I feel that most of my book sales have came to pass, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been sharing most of the content of the book all over
For
the place,
free
but
forever.
people still would like to give me something in return for what I shared.
Yep.
So if you can provide so much value that they cannot help reciprocating, that I
Yeah.
feel is the way to build something that is stable and where you can point people's direction and attention, or their attention into any direction that you want, because
Yeah.
they trust you. Trust is such an important part in the early stages of building a business. Like, your first customers should be the people that you convince to trust you and then invite it into your project, not the other way around. Not just try to get them into your business and then kind of talk to them until they trust you. You should be in this community, actively engaged with people before you even invite them to your product.
Love that. So that's a way that you kind of keep an eye out for people who are kind of doing that on Twitter, where they kind of always have this like following, and then they launch a product, and almost like by default people sign up because it's like they give, ask. Like if I've ever shared anything that's given you value or brought you value or helped you in any way, like here's a way you can help me. Like you can if you want, doesn't matter. It's almost like a non-sell. But is there anybody in the chat who's working on something like that, who've kind of got like an interest-based product where they're kind of building it for themselves, but they know there's other people in their audience that might be interested? Or is there some who's going for the approach of actually just like looking for a problem and then building it specifically, and it might just slightly fall out of their interest wheel? One question that I wanted to ask is, in terms of first customers, how many people would you look to get interested in a product before you actually launched it in any way?
I think super hard to answer, because obviously this will depend on the price point of the product, of one individual customer of the product. I think I cannot give you a number, honestly. I would say like something around, if they would all pay for the product, it should be $1,000, $1,000 MRR, or even maybe 500. I don't really know, because if it's a side project, it has a different kind of economics than if it is supposed to be a full-time thing. And if it's a project that you can kind of let go for a while, or if you need to get it to a certain MRR because you just lost your job and you have a family to feed, it's all quite different. But it should be bigger than zero. And it should be an amount of people that you can still reliably, or that you can talk to and get a variety of answers. Like if you get just 2 customers and only one of them is responsive to talking with you, then you won't really get valuable feedback from it. So I remember having a mentee that had around 20 people actively using the product, and that was pretty much a good number, like 2,000 people, most of them responsive to messages and to like just feed, like validation calls, even conversations like this. It's a good number to start with. And keeping, not only talking to those people in the beginning and then completely ignoring them, but actually keeping some sort of ongoing conversation with them, that would actually help most. That would help even more than having 30 people in the beginning. Having 20 people that you continuously talk to, and new features happen, you ask their opinion of how this changed their workflow, or how much does this make it easier, did it make it harder to use, like these kind of things. That's where your value is from. So if you can get 1,000, that's cool. If you get 20, I think that you're at a good point. But
got it.
Again, if you have a software that you charge people $1,000 a month for, then maybe 2 or 3 are enough. If you charge $10 a month, you might want to go for 20.
Got it. Siddharth said, so he's building it for the community he's a part of. I really like this approach, because you're kind of like already embedded in it, and you can kind of feel out and like have those conversations, and you can maybe expand on this. But I think the other reason why this is important is because you can have, if you're already in a community, there's like a strong likelihood that that's like an interest of yours, and you could talk about that for a long time. As opposed to just like going and trying to seek out a problem out of your wheelhouse.
Yeah, like to me, a good audience has, I think, 4 or 5 characteristics. I think let me see. I'm prepared. Like to me, there's like 5 words that I like. One is awareness, like you actually are part of it and you know it and you are in there for a reason. The second one is affinity. Like how much do you like it? Are you like do you enjoy these people? Do you enjoy what those people like? Like is this a community that you actually like to be a part of? Third one would be opportunity. Like is there stuff in this community that you can solve, right? Are there interesting problems essentially? It's number 4. Ooh, welcome, I guess. Do these people have any kind of interest in paying for solutions?
Yep.
Which, if you're going to turn something into a business, you better find a community that is willing to pay for solutions. And there are communities out there that have really cool problems. You like them, and you are part of them, but they will not pay for anything. These communities exist,
Mm.
right? Lots of, I guess, in the more artistic fields, or in the community work, or like stuff where you are expected to not pay for things and do them from the goodness of your heart. Kind of hard to build a business in there. So welcome is an important part. Just getting the filtering out those communities or those audiences that will not pay for anything. And the last part is size. Is this community big enough to support a business? And is it small enough so that there's not the potential for gigantic companies to just immediately build a clone, build a copy of your product and kind of push you to the side?
Got it.
So yeah, so awareness, affinity, opportunity, welcome, and size. These are the 5 parts.
Like it.
And the great thing is when you are already part of a community, like Siddharth is describing, then you know a lot of these things already. And you can find these things out. In particular, like size is easy to measure when you are part of the community. You
Mm-hmm.
kind of just see how much interaction is going on. Obviously, affinity is clear. Like if you like what people are talking about, and if you enjoy opening the browser to go into this community, looks like you could spend a couple of years of your life helping those people, right?
Yep.
And then the interesting parts there, I guess, are opportunity and welcome, like figuring out, are there interesting problems that warrant a solution and will people pay for one? And that's easier if you actually are able to observe the kinds of things that people talk about.
Got
Like
it.
my approach to audience first is embed yourself in a community and then shut up for a week. That's really what I feel is one of the best things you can do, is just go into the Facebook groups, go to Twitter, go into the indie hackers forums, or whatever kind of weird 90s web forums that still exist for any given community. I did some research on plumbers for some reason because I wanted to see how easily it is done to find these audiences and the water coolers that they hang out at. And I did find the New Jersey Plumbers Association forum, which is like a PHP like based bulletin board from the 90s, but has literally 50,000 plumbers that consistently interact in this web forum there. So
Whoa.
these communities exist, and you can just sign up as a, I don't know, plumbing fan or somebody who wants to become a plumber, and then you just start reading. You start reading, what do these people talk about? What kind of questions do they ask each other?
Mm-hmm.
What are the points of friction that come up more and more and more than others? And you figure out what their critical problems are. And then at some point, if you have expertise or if you're just willing to learn, you start engaging, you start responding to people's questions, you ask questions, you give your opinion, you give your knowledge. And then at some later point, you will just be able to create original content, create your own little blog posts, or just write something in the community itself and not even have a blog post outside. Just really do it for the community. That is usually a sign of a large buy-in on your end, because if you do something only in there,
Yep.
then this is for the community and not for anybody else. This is just for them. It's a big sign of respect. So at some point, you will become an expert. And you want to become an expert in the little niche community that you're part of, because an expert is reputable. And a reputable
Right.
person, when they sell you something or when they ask you to do something, well, you will likely do it, right? And this is not a trick. This is just how we interact with each other in communities to begin with. Like we learn, we share, we become experts, and then we share again, right? Or we reap the rewards of whatever kind of learning experience we have. So this embedding, I think, is the best thing you can do in any community that you want to build a product for.
Yeah, I think that's good. We so I want to talk a bit about like actual tactics around like getting your first customers. So maybe you like found a community where they hang out, but like the next steps following that. So if anybody's got any questions around actually finding customers for your projects or products? Also, if you're building with no code tools, likelihood is you can build stuff, or like at least like the first version of something, pretty quickly. So I think the finding user stage actually comes on quite quickly in the no code space compared to traditional programming space. So how would you, so pop any questions that you've got in the chat, but let's say, okay, you found the plumbing community, you're reading, like what are the tactics of actually going out and finding those first few customers for you?
And in many ways, I guess a lot of this is really cold outreach or like semi-warm outreach. You see people who have a problem, and either they are plumbers in this web forum somewhere that talk about how their, I don't know, pipe fitting inventory software is from the 80s and they hate it, and you've built something, you want to build something cool, right? You don't have to have it built. You just need to be interested in building it, and then you reach out to them. You're in a direct message there, or you figure out their email address or some way of reaching them, maybe commenting under the post and say, I'm also interested in this and I think this can be done better. Do you want to like have a quick conversation about this? Can be in a call, it can be through chat, it can be on Twitter, however you want. Like I guess be forgiving, because you're asking people to communicate with a stranger. So
For sure.
different people have different thresholds for how intimate they want a conversation to be. I guess in the plumbing space, you could just really have a call, pick up your phone and dial a number. That probably will do it. So really reaching out to people who experience the pain that you want to solve, like exactly those people, because the moment you are in a community, you find those people, because those are the people that complain about stuff. Right? These are the people that write those posts saying, I can't find my software, it doesn't work. These are the people that you can figure out, or you can ask questions to figure out more about their problems. So really embedding also means like keeping a tally of who is an interesting customer and then starting to reach out.
I think just to jump in there, I think it's common for people to want like a magic bullet solution to actually finding first customers. And I know that actual one-on-one cold outreach can sometimes be daunting, especially like picking up the phone. I mean, I'm like a former recruiter, so I know how scary it is when you're actually just trying to pick up the phone and ask you for something out of the blue and just getting told to, well, whatever, insert your swear word here. But like, so that could be actually quite scary, but often doing the one-on-one thing in the early stages, I know you can take that really far, and there's some companies who handhold all the way through to thousands of users, but there's a lot of valuable insights to be gained from that.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the most important things when you're starting out and you're just talking to your first couple people is not to sell them anything. Like you don't want to sell them something that doesn't exist. You want them. You're not trying to do this kind of last century style transaction. It used to be, so you have a store, somebody comes into the store, you try to get them to buy as many things as possible, they pay and they leave the store and you never see them again. I mean, for many stores, that is how they work. The fewest stores actually have regulars, have customers who come back and they interact with them. And the moment they are regulars, the moment you start to interact with them in a completely different way, because you know their revenue is not just this moment, it's going to be every future moment that you have with them. So you ask them about their kids, you ask them if the thing you sold them last time did a good job, or, you know, like they like the food that you sold them or whatever. The moment you start seeing your transaction with your customer as an ongoing relation, you act differently. And when you start this kind of cold outreach, this is the first step to your hopefully never-ending customer relationship, right? It's not just trying to get as many people trying my product and then hoping that 10% convert. No, you're talking to 20 people, and you should want that every single of those people, every single person will be a customer of your product 2 years in the future. And you should treat them as if they already were customers that were with you for 2 years, because that's who they are supposedly in the future, right? So that's how you should ask them. You should not tell them, well, I'm going to build this thing and I'm going to sell it for $29. Would you want to buy this? No, right? You start by, or you should at least consider starting by talking to them. I want to solve this problem. I really need input from people who have a lot of knowledge in the space. You seem to be a person that is extremely knowledgeable. You know how you interact with
Yeah.
customers, right? You get them in there.
Flattery goes a long way.
It's gonna be great for you. You're gonna get a tool that is helpful. It's gonna be great for me. I'm gonna build a business out of this. And we can get to a deal in the future if we need to. But right now, it's really about solving this problem. And I would like to get your expert opinion, right? Like that will give you access to people, and it will give you continuous access to people because they tell you something. You make it happen. You ask them, is this what you imagined, or would you think it should be different? And you have this kind of continuous validation loop with those people, a feedback cycle that really builds a relationship and a good product at the same time. Now that is something that you should aspire to in every single initial customer outreach conversation.
Got it. So maybe let's talk. I think Tristan might be trying to type some issues that he's run into.
I've been typing for quite a while.
I know it might be a long list. So we can leave some time to answer these. We've got 10 minutes left.
Sure.
I know we could probably talk forever. Let's think about, let's say you found the issue you want to work on, and you've kind of got a product where it like solves one of these problems that you found. So we can use plumbers, for example. Maybe we found a better way for them to source some materials and link them up with suppliers. Now that you like have the ability to build more features, how do you do that in terms of like priority? Because I know, let's say in relation to the no-code space, you can kind of go off and you can hit the ground running. You can just build loads of features and then see what sticks. Or you can be quite strategic about it, which may lend itself to traditional software methods when you have like feature prioritization and user, all that sort of good stuff. How would you approach that if you were building with no-code tools?
Well, that's, I think, the ever elusive MVP, right? When is the right amount of features reached to have an almost feature complete product, minimum viable product, or there's a couple other versions of the V in this one, but it doesn't really matter. That the thing is, it should solve the problem that you set out to solve. If your features solve this problem sufficiently, then you might actually have enough. And everything that you want to build beyond that, because I know the feeling of wanting to build more because we think it would be kind of cool. But just look at Microsoft Word around like 2005, when you had those ribbons and you had like 10 of these ribbons and more than 3/4 of the screen was ribbons. And then there was this little bit of text left.
Yeah.
That is what happens when you build all the features that you can build into a software product or into any product to begin with. So I would assume that you can definitely overdo it. So I think if you have somebody you have a communication with, and a prospect, an early customer, that should be somebody if you don't have this person today, you should start reaching out to people like 10 minutes from now, once this thing is over, right? You should go into your community, find the person that you think is most likely to be able to help you building your product in a much better way, and start a dialogue. Explain to them what you're doing, explain to them how far you are, what you've already done, and maybe, just maybe, they're going to respond and give you some pointers, give you some insights, give you some opinion, give you some answers to questions that you hopefully asked in a non-leading way, right? But it is important to have somebody that you can bounce this off, because if you're just building in a vacuum, and lots of developers do that because we think we know, and I include myself, and I think even no coders are developers. They're just not coders, but still they're developing stuff. So we think we have this perfect understanding of how the world should be, but honestly, the world is other people, and other people have requirements, and those are the requirements that you need to fulfill, not the fictitious ones in your mind. So having this conversation with a customer, with the prospect from the beginning, and building your MVP along their requirements is probably not just one, but a couple, right? If you do it with just one person, then you might run into this. You don't build it for yourself, but just for them. So it's still not going to be a universally appealing product. But just having feedback from your customers will tell you when you have reached this kind of MVP stage, because it will be always the same stuff they ask for until you reach the MVP. And after that, it will be different stuff that they ask for, right? People will
Gotcha.
ask for the same things until you reach this point, and then they will go into all these different directions because now the minimum is reached, and now they just want their personal custom stuff. So that's a
Okay.
good indicator, I guess. Usually, that the moment there is this what's it called, dissent among the opinion of what should be done next, you know that you are at a point where there's enough already, because either that or you are building two different products at the same time. But
Mhm.
yeah, and MVP is when people are kind of a chorus of requests and not a cacophony, I guess.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Nice. Stuart said your wife was user zero, correct? Solve her own pain point, was having personal interest and business interest and advantage.
Yes, yes, and yes. So she was the both the person envisioning the product, designing the product, she's the CEO of the company, so owning the product, and also prototyping. The technical part was my work, but building this, iterating over ideas, iterating over concepts. That was also her. So she was tester, quality assurance, all these things at the same time. The great thing about our market back then was that it was so codified. Like, these were English online teachers teaching for Chinese companies. And Chinese companies, as you can probably expect, they're pretty strict when it comes to curriculum because it's China. So everything was well defined. So all the teachers working for these Chinese companies had the exact same curriculum. And it was really the exact same thing that it would need to do. And that allowed Danielle to understand exactly what the problems were, because every single teacher had the exact same problem.
Mhm.
And that is the ultimate benefit of a niche, right? If in a niche, you're so deep down in the niche that everybody is essentially homogenous, everybody has the exact same problem, then solving this is like um, a really precise operation. You don't need to be broad in solving a very precise problem. You need to be precise. And a precise solution to a precise problem is a perfect fit, and that will make people pay for it, or at least understand the value of a solution. So the personal interest here was not just really having her problem solved, but also understanding that her problem was actually a commonly occurring problem for tens of thousands of people. And that comes from
Got it.
understanding and being part of this community. We knew that these people existed because we were watching them talk on Facebook every single day. And I guess the business interest was also stop teaching English online, because that is a lot of work. You have to do a lot of singing and dancing, which is kind of cute, but it's also slightly annoying if you're sitting in the same room with noise canceling headphones trying to code, you know? So we were trying to turn this into something bigger, which we did. And it was quite successful. But I think the most important part is having been part of the community, understanding the commonly shared pains, the commonly experienced problems, and then understanding that there was a willingness to pay for tools, and then actually giving them something that they would be willing to pay for.
Got it. Sounds so easy.
Yeah, it just took me a couple dozen tries to get there, but yeah, it does sound easy. It just really is a question of conviction and
Yep.
just not giving up, trying to do this over and over again. So
Great.
even if for people that are here in this workshop today, if the thing doesn't work out, which it might not, got to be realistic, you still learn how to build a thing. And the next thing you build, you will take this learning with you. And the next thing you build, these learnings will be with you. And it's like just increasing opportunity surface wherever you can, learning new things, exposing yourself to things that you've never done before, increasing your skill set, increasing your even exposure to new communities. Like, just imagine how many audiences you are part of in your life without being conscious of it, right? We talked about this, I think, the last
You
time.
did. I'll share the
And
link out because we went quite deep on that.
yeah, that's every single day that you learn something new, you're exposing yourself to a new audience, a potential audience of people, which increases the potential of problems you can solve, increases the potential of products you can build, it eventually increases the amount of businesses that you can successfully run.
There you
So
go. That's it.
gotta want to learn, I guess.
Absolutely. So a couple of things I wanted to end on. First one is a bit of like a task, so to speak. So we want to kind of leave someone with like a practical thing they can go and do. And it seems to me like a good thing that we'd be able to do is actually just go out and talk to people, and two, collate the feedback that you get around the topic, interest, or problem that you've got, put them into like a doc, like a Notion doc or a Notion table, and then actually use that to prioritize something you're going to build. Does that sound like something?
That sounds really nice. I'm going to throw another one that I just thought about earlier. I think while recording my podcast, which is on a similar topic. Somebody asked me how they can retroactively find an audience for their product, and I think this might be interesting for people to try. You kind of know what your audience is going to be. If you have a product, you kind of know, right? If you build a tool for software engineers are your audience. If you build a tool for people who, I don't know, like good food, foodies are your audience. But inside of your audience that you have, there are sub audiences, right? It's kind of a recursively defined thing. Like software engineers, there's front end people, back end people, there's infrastructure people, there's no coders, even there's people who build no code tools. It's all these little things. And if you solve a problem, then figure out how critical this problem is, not just for your main audience, but for each individual audience in that main audience. And go as deep as you want, do the recursion a couple times, and figure out who has this as their most critical problem. I guess an example would be monitoring tools, right? Where you monitor if your website is up or down.
Absolutely.
A front-end developer doesn't really need this. A back-end developer might. A full-stack engineer that runs their own business, that has to do everything with their tech, they really need it, right? So criticality of that problem is so much different for them than it is for somebody who is just building front-end code. So if you have an audience, just try to go deeper a couple levels and figure out where the criticality really hits, and then make this your main audience and engage with them and embed yourself in this particular niche, because that will allow you to be an expert faster because there's fewer people you have to overtake. It will allow you to gather much more precise information, and you can rank stuff, which is always fun. You have a table and you can say it's 90% critical, it's 10% critical.
Filters to the top.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to do that, just do some introspection into the audience that you've already picked and maybe find a much better, much more precise definition of who you can serve.
Got it. Love it. Sounds good to me. I'll get something drawn up for that for everybody. Final question from me. What would you like to see people work on in terms of either a product, niche, or area? So what's interesting to you at the moment?
Oh man, I was going to say Star Trek technology. I want the replicator. I want the holodeck, but probably it's not going to work. Anything that allows people to, I just can tell you from my perspective, to share their journey with other people, share their learnings, share their their errors, their mistakes, their failings, share their struggle. Anything along these lines is something that I've come to value incredibly, because I love watching people getting better by being public about it, learning from other people's mistakes, sharing theirs, and getting just information on how to do it better next time. Anything that can empower and elevate other people's journeys is something that I would like people to see. And this is a problem. So yeah, now I have to find the audience that this fits into and the solutions, right? But I think people who need to share or who would like to share, and enabling them to share the good and the bad parts of their journey, that would be something that I would like to see more of.
Awesome. Arvid, I think that's a great place to wrap up. I think that's a good problem that people should try and tackle. So thanks for your time again for the second time on. Great conversation again. I'm sure a second of many more to come. Thanks everybody for coming and listening to us talk. Hope you found some of the information in there useful. I know I did. And good luck with the rest of your challenge. We've got a few more workshops coming up this month. Again, hope they're useful for you. And yeah, any questions, make sure you reach out in the Makerpad community and forum. And if there's any specifically that you want me to ask Arvid, I'll make sure that I push them on to him as well. Arvid,
yeah.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much. And thank you everybody for listening to me rambling for an hour. That was really sweet of you. And good luck. Good luck with your projects. It's going to be an awesome journey. And do share what you learned. So I would ask that.
Where can everyone find you, Arvid, online?
You can follow me on Twitter. Probably the best thing, Arvid Kahl, ARVIDKAHL. And yeah, just ask me questions there. If you follow me and I follow you back, DMs are open, and I will follow you back because it's just what I do. So yeah, just reach out to me on Twitter, and I would gladly help with anything I can do.
Brilliant. You're a superstar. Thanks again, Arvid. Thanks again, everybody. And speak to you soon. See you later. Bye.